All right, guys, we brought you damn good beer, and now we are bringing you damn good beef. That's right. Hassel Cattle Company is the absolute best source for farm-to-table Wagyu beef in the country. Hassel Cattle Company is a fourth-generation cattle farm out of Texas. They ship all over the beautiful USA, and they'll ship it right to your door. They call their beef the blue-collar Wagyu because it's the best damn Wagyu that every man or woman can afford. They've got Wagyu smoked sausage, New York strip, beef bacon, Wagyu Franks with no fillers, 2 jerky flavors. Their Hamburger won Food Network's Northeast Burger Jam, and the entire country can get in and has been loving them some Hassel Cattle Company. So check them out, Hassel Cattle Company, HASSELL, cattlecompany.com, and use the code DNVR10 for 10% off your order. And any order over $200, you'll receive free shipping. Check them out, HassleCattleCompany.com.
Number one for the one and only DNVR. 2 goes out to Zach, Mace, RK, and the bar. 3 for Mr. B in that old trophy case. Number 4 we're still waiting for. Well, bring on the chase. Out on the field, a mile high, Broncos win is our desire. Couple with a breakfast crew and a friendly orange and blue till the bitter end. Come and join us at the DNVR. We are DNVR.
Welcome in to the DNVR Broncos podcast presented by MSU Denver Online. Check them out. msudenver.edu/online is where you can scope out all they have to offer. 40-plus online hybrid programs, 750 possible classes, something for everyone at MSU Denver, and rigorous, affordable programs taught by professors who bring the real world into the classroom. Check them out, msudenver.edu/online, and use the code DNVR Sports to get all of your application fees waived.
My boys, what's shaking? Guys, this feels like a great Wednesday. The comment section popping off already. Love to see this energy we got.
Yeah, we got some great energy in here. I worry our topic might hurt that energy, but you know what? That's downer thinking. Shout out to our guy, Brandon Perna, making a appearance there. And then we've got the Dingo in the comments.
Let's go, baby.
VW Bun, I taught them how to pronounce Wagyu, which I also didn't know until we started partnering with Hassel Cattle Company.
Ryan, I don't think anyone knew. I mean, it's Wagyu, right? I mean, until you learn that it's Wagyu.
Is that what you both thought it was Wagyu? I mean,
yeah.
Okay, I guess I knew. It never occurred. It never occurred to me that it was Wagyu. I always thought, it sounds like it looks Wagyu.
I feel like even at nice steakhouses I've been to, not to throw Elway's under the bus. I'm not necessarily saying it was Elway's, Shanahan's. Who knows where it was? But I feel like they even say Wagyu.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
I learned about it a while ago because it was like you had Kobe beef and you had Wagyu beef, and I'm like, and I asked at a restaurant once what the difference was, and I completely forgot the explanation. They both taste really freaking good, so I mean, I'm fine with either.
I thought Kobe beef was with Shaq.
Oh.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
We need a rim shot sound effect. We need to pull one of those, RK.
Anyways,
I don't think Kobe or Shaq have any rim shots. I think it's just purely net or the dunk.
Nice. Keep it rolling. Anyways, hopefully that's not an update saying that Deshaun Watson went anywhere but the Broncos.
Sorry, no.
We got to get into the conversation of the day, and it revolves around Von Miller. Obviously, the news comes out yesterday that the investigation into Von Miller has concluded, and no decision has been made yet as to whether or not they will pursue charges. But while that's like a no news item, it does bring up the conversation of what Von Miller's future is here. And obviously, the results of that investigation, the decision made by the DA, will have an impact on this this entire topic. But I just wanted to have a conversation with you guys about what it looks like for Von. What do you think? Do you think that the results or the decision from the DA is the determining factor? Do you think the money is the determining factor? Zach, what do you think is the determining factor for whether or not Vaughn will be a Bronco?
I mean, this certainly has to play into the equation, right, guys? I mean, this could be a very serious charge brought up if it is brought up. And I think it's important to note, Ryan, like you said, no charges have been brought up yet, but we do know that there was an open investigation that has now completed. They called it an extensive investigation. If you're the Broncos and you're talking about a guy that you're about to give $18 million to, you can't just turn a blind eye to that. But you're also not saying he's guilty yet because he's not even charged. So it's a really tough situation to be. But Ryan, what makes it even tougher, guys, is that you may not know. You're certainly not going to know the end result if this does go to trial, but you may not even know if he's going to be charged with anything before you have to make this decision, which is what makes it so tough. And of course, once you make that decision, you have to do it before the start of the league year on whether or not you're picking up his contract option. That guarantees $7 million of his contract. And while it's not the full $18 million, guys, if you're guaranteeing $7 million, you're saying that Von Miller is going to be back on the contract that he has.
Yeah, and one of the things that kind of looms over this is, let's say Von Miller is charged with something, then he would have very little value on the market. His value would be depressed. If he isn't charged in the next few weeks, then you know what? And the case is closed, then all of a sudden his value on the market goes up. This affects what kind of hand Von Miller has if the Broncos come to him with a restructure regardless. Now, the other thing that kind of looms over this is you would imagine that the Broncos know what's in that report or have a good idea about it because, they usually work with local law enforcement. Of course, Keith Bishop, their director of security, former FBI, former DEA. They tend to have this information before we do. So you would think that any decision they're making is based on information that is not out there right now, that is far from public knowledge. And if he's not going to be charged, you think that they've already come to a choice on Von Miller regarding whether to give him an extension, a restructure, or not.
Yeah, you expect George Payton to have a plan regardless of what happens here, and kind of if this happens, here's where we're going. And you're right, Mace. They usually do have the inside scoop on this sort of thing, to say the least. With that in mind, I think regardless of what happens with this Von Miller case, the Broncos are not going to pay him $18 million this year. And that's strictly business. Like, it's just not good business. Von Miller, when he did play most recently, wasn't worth that much money and didn't play last year. And so he's only gotten 2 years older since the last time you saw him play. And you just simply can't afford to pay him that much money. And it's just going to create an awkward scenario. And this is what always happens with legends at the end of their careers. And it's what happens when you give them this big contract where okay, they're going to be into their 30s by the time this contract is over. Like, it's basically saying like, oh, that's a future Broncos problem. And it's going to happen when you sign that deal, where you're going to have a problem at the end of it because, the likelihood is that he's not going to be worth that money anymore. So I think best case scenario for all parties, obviously, is that hopefully Vaughn isn't guilty of any crimes here. Mm-hmm. And then the Broncos sign him up to a 3 to 4 year extension with a very much smaller cap hit.
Yeah, and so let's talk about what that deal could look like, because I totally agree with you, Ryan. I think there's no chance, regardless of how this case goes, I think there's no chance that he's back on the $18 million cash that he'll get this year on his deal, $22 million cap hit. Of course, only $4 million in dead money. Broncos can free up $18 million by turning down that contract option. So I don't think that they pick up that contract option. So it's they have about 3 weeks in order to get a restructure done if they're not going to, or if they would just decline that contract option anyways. So what does that look like? Because do you guys think a pay cut, just a straight 1 year pay cut, is in the cards? Or are we talking about a restructure where you're adding, a year or 2 or 3 onto his final year of the deal?
frankly, I think what's going on with this investigation is going to have an impact on it, because if he's going to be charged, then they could simply say pay cut, chance to earn it back, but know that, look, if you're facing charges on this, Vaughn, they wouldn't say this, but they would feel this way. They'd have all the hand, because if Vaughn turned down a restructure in that instance, he goes on the market with these charges looming over him. What is he going to get in terms of a contract? If there are no charges coming in, Von Miller, I think, has some hand in this. And then, like you said, Zach, it does look like something where it's a restructure over multiple years, and they're adding some guaranteed money for future years to keep him around. So that's where unfortunately for Vaughn, and unfortunately just for this whole situation, you can't separate the charges or potential charges, if there are any, from this contract situation. Right now, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, and this is where this conversation always goes. And then it always goes to this next part, which is, okay, all three of us say Von Miller has to take a restructured deal or a pay cut to be a Denver Bronco this year. Well, we have one experience with this question being asked to Von Miller, and it is certainly not a memorable one in a good way. It's very much memorable in a bad way, of course. It was, Vaughn on with our friends Stokely and Zach. They asked him about it. He hung up the phone. They thought, oh, maybe he just lost his connection. They got him back on the phone. They asked him again, and he didn't answer. And he was snappy with them until they had no choice but to end the interview. So there's just no way you could come away from that saying like, "Whoa, well, priority number one is for Vaughn is to be a Bronco for life." I want to be able to say that. I just simply can't after hearing that. And so then you get to the part of, okay, well, if Vaughn's not willing to take a restructure, are we going to be able to, is it going to come down to either the Broncos pay him that money or he's not coming back?
Right. Yeah. And you're absolutely right, Ryan. You have to think back to that interview and just how turned off Von Miller was to that. And we have Mile High Profit coming in the comment section. It says, as a criminal defense attorney, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that charges are unlikely at this point. And if they are to be filed, they won't be filed before the league year begins, which is just the toughest position for the Broncos, is to not know before they have to make a decision, because it's not like they can let that option pass and then restructure with him. No, he would be a free agent, because if they let the option pass, you're declining it if you're not picking it up, then he automatically becomes a free agent. And then hometown discounts, guys, those don't exist anymore, because you're on the open market. And you may get the Dallas Cowboys saying, Vaughn, we're going to throw, maybe it's even 1 year, $20 million your way, where the Broncos are saying, oh, we were going to go $20 million over 2 years for you. And then Vaughn, the market is going to be way bigger for Vaughn than it would be just in restructuring here. So that, if that is true, Mile High Profit, and you're a criminal defense attorney, more than I do, then that's the worst spot for the Broncos to be in.
Now, if you're the Broncos, though, would you also give him a restructure, and maybe there's guaranteed money, but if he is charged or if he's convicted, it's off the table. It go, you have a conviction or even a charge, then it goes away. I mean, you can structure it like that, but would Von Miller accept it in that instance? Again, if he hasn't been charged, Vaughn has more hand in this discussion than he would otherwise.
Absolutely, and that's why that's kind of the caveat here. And like you said, the Broncos not knowing is a really bad position for them to be in. But like May said earlier, they probably have a little bit of a beat on the situation. Right. It also should be noted that what James Palmer said on Three Ring Circus last Friday, when he mentioned that a lot of guys could be taking discounts, not for hometown discounts, to go try to win championships. And I would be lying if I said there's not a little piece of me that thinks Von Miller wouldn't mind going and playing with Shaq Barrett and Tom Brady in Tampa Bay. Now, I don't think that's his number one priority, but I do think if push comes to shove and this gets a little tenuous, he might just say, like, you know what, just cut me.
Right.
And I'll go try to chase another championship.
Well, that's a great point, Ryan, because it's not like Vaughn has to renegotiate with the Broncos in order for him to get paid this year. No, he probably knows that if he hits the open market, that he's going to get more than he would with staying with the Broncos. So now we try to dive into Vaughn's mind and say, okay, what's more important? Finishing as a Bronco, which we know, guys, he wants to do, but probably there's a certain cost where that's not worth it to him anymore. Or is it winning a championship? Is it signing a 4-year deal for $80 million if he can go get that on the open market right now? Or is it just that 1-year championship run? And that's probably what this is going to come down to, because I also don't envision a scenario where Vaughn is back on the contract he has right now. I also don't envision a scenario if there's no charges and the legal stuff goes away, if that the Broncos don't offer him a restructure at all. I think the Broncos want him back at the right price. It's just about figuring out that price. And right now, guys, Vaughn, he averages $19 million on this contract. Like I said, he's going to get $18 million this year. What's the right price? Because Von Miller, he's Von Miller, and that's probably how he views himself. We were all just gawking at just how good he was in training camp last year. He looked so freaking good coming off that 8-sack season the year before where he did not look as good. He looked so good last year. So he's probably saying, I'm going to be right back in that shape, and I'm going to, just go upwards with my career after this. And the Broncos are saying, Vaughn, you have 8 sacks in the past 2 seasons. We need you to take a huge discount.
Yeah, to me, the number is right around 10. We always say $1 million a sack. And he had 8 his last time around. Okay, you give him the benefit of the doubt, but he's also 2 years older, like I said. So, as much as you'd love to say, oh, he could turn around and have 15 sacks, and he very well could. That's not what the Broncos are going to be saying at the negotiating table. They're going to be saying, look, I don't know if they bring up the $1 million a sack thing, but it's the going rate. And so, they're saying, hey, look, you had 8 sacks the last time you were out there. You're coming off an injury, which, by the way, we don't talk enough about how scary this injury is for what Von Miller does. I mentioned this last Friday. One of the things that makes Von Miller a freak is ankle flexibility. It's something that, you look at when you look at a pass rusher. Von Miller is elite at it. It's why, he bends like Gumby when he goes around the edge. If you look at some of the, just some still shots of him coming around the edge, his leg is at like a 45-degree angle or more from what his ankle is. And it's just scary that happened to his ankle. So, again, that's another thing that isn't mentioned a lot and that the Broncos will be using if they try to renegotiate with him, where I just think they'll be saying, look, we can't go higher than $10 million a year for you.
Well, that's the $1 million a sack is interesting, because what if you have a contract that is structured to where you say, okay, there's $10 million guarantee you get no matter what, but every sack beyond 10 is $1 million bonus. So all of a sudden,
now we're talking.
He gets to 16 sacks. He gets another $6 million. And would Vaughn go for that? I don't know, but that might be a creative way of giving him a contract that allows him to reach the stratosphere. And then maybe you try to pitch it to him as saying, Vaughn, you bet on yourself. Remember what happened when Peyton Manning bet on himself when he took a pay cut back in 2015? Of course, his money was tied to team incentives. He earned every dollar of it back by going and taking and having the Broncos in the Super Bowl and eventually winning it, even though he wasn't necessarily a huge reason why. He still kind of did what he had to do to earn all that money back.
I personally absolutely love that idea. I'm not sure Vaughn will love it. I think we're getting closer now, but I think he may say, wait, again, you're asking Von Miller to take half a pay up to 50% pay cut to go from 18 million to 10 million. I mean, almost that. I think we'd have to move that number a little higher for him. And then just where is that? Maybe I think Vaughn would go down to 15. It's not really a big pay cut in the Broncos' mind. So do they settle 14, 13? And then also, are we talking about this just being a 1-year deal, or is this a 4-year, $40 million deal, 10 years or $10 million a year, and this incentive is built in every single year for Vaughn?
Could be. And honestly, though, if I'm Von Miller, I know how circumstantial getting sacks is. And I'm saying, like, actually, I would prefer if it was tied to my PFF grade. You know, 1 million for every point over 85 that I get or whatever it is. Because if you go back and look, in 2019, didn't have a lot of sacks. He was still dominant in the run game. And he's still graded out, I believe, as one of the top 3 pass rushers in the NFL that year. So again, I love the idea of 16 sacks, 16 million. You know, it's all yours. But if I'm Vaughn and his agent, I'm telling him, we don't want to be tied to sacks. Pressures, QB hits. You know, now you're talking sacks are very circumstantial based on the quarterback you're playing and the tackle you're lined up against.
And guys, do you know where $10 million a year would put Vaughn in terms of NFL edge rushers right now? Where would he rank if he made $10 million in terms of all the edge rushers in the league? And this is according to Spot Track. So taking in defensive ends, outside linebackers that are considered edge.
Gosh, I don't even want to guess. I feel like it would be very low.
It is very low. 29th.
Yeah.
29th.
I should have guessed. I was going to say right around 32.
Yep. You're right there. And that's probably something that Von Miller would say. Again, I'm Von Miller. You're Super Bowl 50 MVP. This is disgraceful. You know, I'm insulted by this. So let's say the Broncos want to go up to 14 million a year. Well, that would put him at 16th. He still may say Robert Quinn is getting that money, $14 million a year. I'm Von Miller. So we go up to $17 million, guys, and that's where you enter the top 10. And that's just where I could see this disconnect being, is Von saying, I'm willing to take a little bit of a discount to help you guys. And then he looks around and sees, oh, well, wait, okay, I'll take 17 million. I'll take one off, and then I'll still be top 10.
Of course, if he says that to George Payton, and what if Payton says, yeah, you're Von Miller. You turned 32 in March. You're coming off of a season-long injury, and the season before that, you're coming off a single-digit sack tally in the scheme that you're going to be in this year. And this is where George Payton, not having the institutional background with Von Miller because he's been in Minnesota rather than in Denver, this is where you think it might lead to what some may call a heartless decision, but I think it's probably more accurate to call it a calculated one here. And the other thing, in trying to allocate the resources properly around the roster, you look at the defense last year, it didn't break down when you had Von Miller out of the lineup and had Bradley Chubb on one side, Malik Reed on the other, Jerry Ataxi rotating in. It broke down when the cornerback position collapsed, and you might spend a first-round pick there, but you're going to have to spend some money there as well. And what's a better allocation of resources at this point? Let's say, for example, they get into the Patrick Peterson sweepstakes. What's a better allocation of financial resources for this defense in 2021? Is it spending that money on Von Miller, or is it making a play at Patrick Peterson?
Well, I mean, the fact that you had a 10-sack season last year from another guy, that's not even Bradley Chubb, of course, Malik Reed, really changes your perspective on that. I think if you say, look, we can get 10 sacks now, again, not nearly as dominant as Vaughn in all other phases, right, but still, if you're talking yourself into spreading out those resources and you're saying we can get 10 sacks out of Malik Reed, it makes that a pretty easy decision, I think, from George Payton's seat in the building. One last thing I want to discuss as it relates to Von Miller, because it wouldn't be a first segment.
Yes,
here.
We had to do it.
Unless I brought up the name Deshaun Watson. Every person I see, every dad on Facebook is saying, trade Von Miller in the trade for Deshaun Watson. And I just wanted to ask you guys, let's say, just for the sake of this conversation, no charges are brought. Even at that case, is Von Miller an asset that the Texans would be interested in this trade, in your opinions?
No, and to an extent, I think I'm not going to say throw in. He's more valuable than a throw in, but he's Bradley Chubb is the selling piece. Justin Simmons is a selling piece. Draymond Jones is a selling piece, and then Vaughn would be a cherry on top, guys. And that's just, it's crazy to say, but Bradley, there's a lot more guys that have more value to the Texans than that. Now, here's what would be valuable to the Texans is bringing Von Miller home back to Texas. That would be a good look for them, and then also having a big name like Von Miller to try to just get some fans' attention back. But in terms of the front office's view, I don't think it's that valuable.
Well, not quite bringing him home. I mean, it is the state of Texas, but the Metroplex and Houston hate each other. I mean, so there's a little bit of a gulf. Now, the A&M fans would love Von Miller. I think, let's say the Texans are thinking in terms of 2 1s, 2 2s, 2 defensive starters. If you throw Von Miller in, I think at most that means you take one of the 2s off the table.
Okay.
Best case scenario.
Well, okay. Here's what you guys keep using this word throw in. And
I know, and it makes you sick.
It does, because we're on the 10-year anniversary this week of the Carmelo Anthony trade. And as much as losing Carmelo hurt, the part that still to this day makes me sick is that Chauncey Billups, the greatest basketball player from the state of Colorado ever, was a throw-in in the deal. And it has hurt the relationship between Chauncey, again, the best advocate for basketball in Denver there's ever been. It has a bad relationship, where he hurt relationship with the Nuggets because of this, and I just don't want to see that happen. So almost just on principle, I want to say, like, don't even do it. Like, just put in the second round pick. If you want to move on from Vaughn, like, just release him. It's better than him being a throw-in in the trade, a last piece on top. Hey, we'll also give you Von Miller. It just the optics of that are too bad. And and it takes me back to James Palmer talking about who was it that. Oh, it was, he was talking about Von Miller, right? He was saying if anything happens with Von Miller, they'll give him the whole red carpet treatment. Putting him in a trade as the throw-in in there is not the red carpet treatment.
It's not. And the other thing that happens, of course, is that you're telling him where he's going if you trade him, whereas if you cut him, you're giving him that ability to say, okay, you're not going to be here, but you can choose your path. You can choose your next team. Very similar to what the Texans ultimately did with J.J. Watt. I can't believe I'm talking about the Houston Texans doing the right thing. Seems like everything they do is the wrong thing. But releasing J.J. Watt and then letting him find his proper path rather than trading him to wherever, that was the right thing to do. And, J.J. Watt going into his 11th season, just like Von Miller. So I do think, I think the notion of throwing him in a trade, I don't think this is something that comes to fruition. I think he's either a Bronco or he's on the open market to do what he wants.
Guys, I also think if Deshaun Watson is a Bronco, that there's a better chance that Von Miller is a Bronco, at least for this year, because then Von can, take a pay cut. That's when I see Von maybe willing to go around 10 million. Maybe he's okay going to 12 million, because he says, not only do I get to stay with the Broncos, at least for this year, and maybe Von just keeps it a 1-year deal so that he can, it's a prove it year for him, but it's a prove it year getting to stay with the Broncos, which is a win. And it's a prove it year getting to play with Deshaun Watson and have this team win again. And Von can experience that. So I think, and I've seen a lot of people out there saying that if you trade for Deshaun Watson, say goodbye to Justin Simmons, say goodbye to Shelby Harris, say goodbye to Von Miller. Maybe for the long haul, you're not keeping all 3 of those guys for, huge contracts 4 years down the line, because Deshaun Watson's cap really starts increasing next year in 2022. But guys, I don't think that's true for this year. I think you could you would keep Justin Simmons on the franchise tag this year if you don't have long-term plans for him. So you keep Justin, maybe you pay Shelby. That's the guy that you end up paying big time long-term. And Von, I think you work out at least a 1-year deal with him in order to keep him around. So at least for 2021, I don't think getting Deshaun Watson hurts your ability to keep those defensive guys.
I don't think it hurts either, but I think like, in the short term in relevance, Zach, maybe we think about Dak Prescott here because the franchise tag deadline is March 9th and Vaughn's $7 million and the new league year kicks in after that. So you're going to have a window where if Dak Prescott is going to be available or not. Now, of course, then the issue becomes where are you getting the cap space for Dak Prescott? And it might come at the expense of Von Miller unless you figure out a way to have a restructure in that window and say, look, the Cowboys didn't tag Dak Prescott.
I wish.
We're all in on him. We're going to try to make him a Bronco. If we make him a Bronco, can we work something out with you that is a restructure, is backloaded, that allows us to get this contract in and take this team to the next level?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And again, I also like Zach's point of if you get Deshaun, if you get Dak, I think Vaughn's like, well, hold on, I want to stay.
Right.
I went through all the crap. I want to be here for the come up. Okay. Because we need to pay this off, I have to ask you guys point blank, and Zach, I'll start with you. Is Von Miller on the Denver Broncos week 1 of next season?
This is tough. And I'm going to say no. And the reason for that is just how, when we went through this contract negotiation, guys, it was hard to really find a middle ground. Unless they do, Mace, I think your point is exceptional. And I love that. But if it's not that, guys, I just don't see where they find this middle ground. Unfortunately, that's not what I hope, but that's just where I see this going.
Mace?
Yeah, that middle ground, it's going to be tough to find. I mean, I'm just kind of, I throw that out there. I'm just kind of tossing out ideas. How can you be creative in the thinking on this? But I think I was asked about this yesterday afternoon as well. I don't think Von Miller is on this team in week 1. I think he's practicing his trade somewhere else. And, even though I offered kind of the Dak Prescott scenario, the bottom line is the more likely outcome there is if Dak Prescott were on the market, that $18 million of that cap space in cash is probably coming from what you freed up because you let Von Miller go.
Fair enough. I didn't expect to be the Lone Ranger here. I'll say yes. Von Miller is a Denver Bronco. I think when push comes to shove, he takes a little more than he wanted to. The Broncos pay a little more than they wanted to, just for the optics of saying, the Super Bowl MVP is back on the Broncos. The fans are already very, I don't know what the word is, testy right now.
Right.
George Payton starting off his career by moving on from an all-time great.
Yeah.
I think we all explained we would understand it if that's what happened, but I think about 80 to 90% of Broncos fans would feel differently.
Yeah, and 80 to 90% of fans in our comments, guys, have been saying, yeah, Von Miller's back. Some people even say 99% that he's back. And it'd be a tough start for George Payton because that would be his first big move, is moving on from Von Miller. There'd be a lot of skepticism his way. Now, Ryan, I do have to ask, is it on a restructure where they add years on, or is it a one-year deal?
Years added. Vaughn, does the whole Bronco for life thing again. It's all sunshine and rainbows, and the cap hit declines as the contract goes on. But he gets however many years he wants to continue playing, whether it's 3 or 4. That's how long this deal goes, and he kind of just rides off into the sunset.
Yeah, and actually, I would probably put another option ahead of that, just in my mind, is a 1-year pay cut where we're kind of surprised at how much he's making. Maybe $14 million for 1 year, kind of a prove-it deal for Vaughn.
There we go. All right, that's going to wrap it up for us on the live side of things. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. Reminder to tune in on YouTube, especially on Friday when we come to you with a new episode of Three Ring Circus, our new Friday live show that's a little more off the wall, if you can even imagine that. But check us out on YouTube. Hit us with a like, hit us with a subscribe. You can sign up for alerts there anytime we go live. We really appreciate all of that. We appreciate you guys for tuning in, but we're going to flip over to the podcast side of things where you can catch us anywhere you listen to podcasts.